Hey everybody, Kenny Jr. here and welcome back to Stick to Games. I know it's been a while, so I'm going to thank you for your patience by working on the most challenging drum piece I have ever learned in my whole career so far, and that is none other than the part from the battle against the Doomed Dragon in Golden Sun: The Lost Age. This part is all about high intensity drumming, with frequent time changes, lots of choppy linear drum patterns, double kick usage, making effective use of nearly every instrument on a traditional 5-piece drum set. I have a lot to explain, so if you're ready to check it out, let's take it to the set. Okay, now let's take it to the set. The track begins in the time signature of 10-8. If you watched the video when we learned the beach theme from Plock together, then using the 8th note as the steady beat should not scare you. You can tell by looking at the part here that we are looking at mostly 16th notes, mainly in the kick drums. So actually, counting this shouldn't be too difficult. We are going to see that the entirety of this piece will use the 8th notes as the steady beat, but that top number is going to change a lot. So let's just be on the lookout for how high or low we need to count. The opening sequence is two nearly identical bars, constant kick drums outlining the 16th notes, snare and crash stabs on the 1 and the upbeat of 2, followed by some tomfoolery as well. Actually, the constant rhythm in the kick drums should serve to help us outline these parts rather cleanly. Right after that, a short little 13-8 section where we will open up with a crash and kick on the 1. Notice how it's an 8th note. So remember, we will need to let that upbeat breathe every time we see solo 8th notes. Our hi-hat joins us for the first time in this piece as we play a quick little chop boom before going to a linear run down the toms. Hit me with another crash, and then we have a short sweeping pattern capped off with a little kick and snare interaction. As long as you remember to count and catch the spacing of those 8th notes, this one should go pretty smoothly. Next, we come to another time change, 5-8. But it is also a short repeated pattern too. The hi-hat gets a bit more active by playing on the upbeats of 1, 2, and then on the downbeat of 4 on a consistent basis for the next 4 bars. Open up with the big 3 on the 1, then start weaving the snare and kick underneath the hi-hats. At the end of each bar, it will either cap off with a quick little chop boom or a double snare attack. Then we have a quick little 2-bar turnaround that goes to 6-8 and then 8-8. We have lots of linear patterns here, so if you were already able to play everything we just did, and I know I say this a lot, but I mean it this time, this part should feel significantly easier. Just watch the tricky rhythm in measure 9 with a sustained crash and kick. Attack on the 1, but not again until the upbeat of 2. Remember, only attack the notes where the ties begin, never where they end up. Back to 13-8, more linear chops, and in my opinion, this measure specifically is the last of the highly difficult bars of music. The hi-hat sees the most activity yet, with a tricky little hi-hat crunch on the upbeat of 8. Catching that is the trickiest part to me because of where it sits in between the other drums. But once you get it, the rest of the measure won't seem so bad as it is mostly pure linear chops. Next up, we find ourselves at another 5-8 section, which is basically a reprise of the opening bar. Constant 16th notes that mainly use the kick, but the snare accents on the 1, 3, and the 5 with an extra little fill at the end of it. Much easier by comparison, right? You'll also notice that we return to the 6-8 and 8-8 turnaround again. There are slight variations here, such as in the 6-8 using all snares and in the 8-8 a slightly different rhythm, but in all, this should feel like fairly familiar territory. The one big difference is that the 8/8 time signature will have one additional bar of music to set up the next section of music. Again, basically using a fill, mostly 16th notes to drive it along and some more toms. By the way, have you noticed the pattern that a lot of these tom fills are using? Kind of those classic my first fill drum patterns, right? Going in order across the toms from highest to lowest. With my students, I like to call this the around the world fill. We see that a lot in this piece, and I think it's a great thing to recognize it, and it's going to help us understand the music a bit better, I think. Now we have a new section of music. Our part returns back to 10/8, and now we have something a little bit closer to a real groove. A repeating pattern that uses the pocket 3 to drive along this time. Lots and lots of kick interaction here, but if you notice, it is following another linear pattern. So let's just keep counting those 16th notes and put the correct instrument on the correct count, then do it 3 times in a row. Then we come to a little 6/8 turnaround, and finally the Doom Dragon starts to be a bit kind to us drummers because we play the same exact thing twice in a row. Another tied crash and kick, followed by another around the world fill. Minor variation on it at the end as it caps off with a quick kick instead of a low tom, which means you need to be prepared for a quick double kick to land back on the 1. By the way, I should mention, other than the parts that require constant 16th note kick drums, I've only been using a single kick for the majority of this piece. It is totally possible to play a lot of this with double kick drum if you'd like throughout the whole piece. For me, I find it easier to use single kick drum on the parts that don't require the constant 16th notes. So at this point, just go with whatever feels the best. The benevolence of the dragon kind of continues because we continue on in 6/8. And what's more, we get another repeated pattern. How amazing. Even better, this one actually puts together like a true groove with a backbeat. And so a lot of us may feel much more comfortable in this section. It almost takes on sort of a disco feel with those hi-hats landing on the upbeats of 1, 2, 4, and 5. The snare drum will consistently land on the downbeats of 2, 4, and 6. Then, the last piece of the puzzle is to just sneak in those kick drums where neither of those other instruments play. This is probably my second favorite part of the track. Ah yes, measure 31. This section is my favorite part of the track. We return back to 5/8 again, but look at that pattern. That is a disco pattern. We are really at home here for 2 bars. Then we have a cool little run featuring, you guessed it, more around the world linear patterns. This part happens essentially twice in a row, but there is a small variation at the end where it has more of a kick and tom interaction. In measure 36, I actually like to spice up those tom hits, turning them into flams. It just feels like a completely natural thing to do in that situation, and it actually reminds me of the gospel style chops we studied in the Octopath Traveler video. Go watch that if you haven't already. We're in the home stretch now, as we have one final 6/8 turnaround. This part is extra cool because the fill cues alongside the other instruments in the track. More linear runs focusing on snare and toms. Not around the world this time, but a little bit trickier passage that will require some clever sticking to hit just right. I tend to lead with my right so that I can cross over my left hand to get from the 1 to the 3, and the left hand can just ride on toms 1 and 2. After that, a small breather before the most intense section of the track. A crash and a kick here with a little bit of space, still in 6/8, so finish counting the rest of that measure. Then 3 quick hits of the hi-hat, a quick little linear fill, then we are off to the races. So here we are, the most intense section of the song. This section is basically another variation of what we did in the very beginning, but it just goes on for a little bit longer. This part does require pretty good endurance, and the double kick will also be required to play accurately as well. It is a part comprised of 16th note kicks, and the snare plays on very specific counts that vary from bar to bar. A few around the world sprinkled in, so the challenge here will most likely come from keeping your 16th notes on the kick drums consistent and even, and landing the snare exactly on the counts that it needs to be on. Enough repetitions of this should help to work out the problems you run into. One final hurdle. The same thing you did before, but add a couple of crashes and hi-hats in it, and then we are done. I'm not going to lie to you all, this one is tough. We have a real doozy of a part here. But let's take a moment to acknowledge the fact that this is a drum part that perfectly underscores one of the greatest video game bosses in all of video game history. And let's also not gloss over the fact that we even find this amazing drum part in a video game in the first place. It is highly difficult, and it took me many hours of practice. But it is possible, and a true testament to the claim that drummers really can do anything in the whole wide world. So let's just keep practicing and getting better together. Ready for a go? Let's take it from the top. disco, 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 disco.